This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and you'll never miss another episode. This is episode 23, and in this episode I sit down with Gene Muller of Flying Fish Brewing Company in Somerdale, New Jersey. Gene gives me a breakdown of how he started a website back in 1995 that was kind of like a This Old House meets the World Wide Web, giving people an inside look at the brewery and how it works. Well, it worked all right because they're one of the biggest breweries in New Jersey right now. So, if you're sitting home right now, not doing much, you should crack open a beer, preferably a Flying Fish one, and enjoy this lovely podcast. Hey guys, I'm Mike Curtin, and this is the Brew World Order Podcast. Today I'm with Gene Muller of Flying Fish Brewing Company in Somerdale, New Jersey. Gene Muller had experienced many professions growing up, from construction to journalism to being a cook in a restaurant. None seemed to interest him more than when he started homebrewing back in 1980. He wound up winning his first homebrewing contest he entered. Soon after that, he came up with the idea of owning his own brew pub. He decided to enter the oldest brewing school in America, Chicago's Siebel Institute of Technology, and then came the really hard part, getting investors to buy into his idea. Well, with plenty of persuasion, he made it work, and in 1996, he opened Flying Fish Brewing Company. Gene?
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you for being with me. Appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here.
So, can you
talk about my favorite subject?
Yeah. Can you tell us about how you wound up finding that funding?
Sure. So I'm what you would call a reluctant entrepreneur. I was never one of those people that had to start their own business, had that drive. I just got this idea when I saw craft brewing kind of taking off around the country when I would travel, and thought there was an opportunity here. So just kind of got into that. I had a job. I was working 40 hours a week, 4 weeks vacation, and then turned into something where I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. But I didn't have really a lot of money. I don't come from a wealthy family. I don't have wealthy friends. So, you would go around. I'd go around with my business plan and say, hey, here's the idea. And they're like, so let me get this straight. You never ran a business. You never ran a brewery or never ran a restaurant. Is that right? And I'm like, yeah. And you want me to invest? I'm like, yeah. So that went about as well as expected. Right. So at the time, there was this new thing starting to hit called the World Wide Web. And it's pretty hard to believe in 1995 when we did our first website, there was no Amazon, there was no Google, there was no spam. Right. It was just like a different world. So I had some friends program a rudimentary website, and we launched it on Labor Day 95, and it was called kind of the world's first virtual microbrewery. I described it as This Old House meets the World Wide Web, and it would do things like, now it's called blogging, before there were blogs. Right. Just do our updates, have little surveys for people to just questions they had about the business. And from that, we were selling T-shirts and pint glasses. Our first T-shirts didn't have a location because we didn't have a building. And, sometimes it's just better to be lucky than good. And I just kind of stepped into I was at the right place at the right time. I mean, even the big news, we're right outside Philadelphia. So the Philadelphia Inquirer, I sent them a press release. They didn't even have internet access. So I had the reporter at my kitchen counter with my old Apple laptop showing them this is what the World Wide Web is. Really? So wow. We got a lot of attention, and interesting. That kind of led to a bank getting interested, and it led to some investors who said, okay, if this guy can do this and start selling, all this merch and creating a brand without, doing it virtually, maybe he can do something when he's got a real building. So it took 2 years, but it all came together pretty quickly. Without the web, that would have never happened. Right. And how did you go about choosing the area you chose originally? Because now you're in Somerdale, right? Yeah, originally, well, I I got the idea to start a brewery when my girlfriend at the time and I went out to New Mexico to look to relocate to buy some land. And driving back, we were in a particularly boring stretch of Arkansas and started brainstorming about doing a brew pub. And, all my resources are in South Jersey, Philly area. And, I kind of wound up here. So our first location was in Cherry Hill. And really, it was the only person who would rent to us. Back then, people thought breweries, they think of smokestacks or, dirty trucks and all, and smells. And, it's not like now where towns are like, hey, please put a brewery on our main street.
Right.
Back then, it was really hard to find somebody that would be willing to take a chance on it. So we were there for 16 years and just outgrew it. And then we found a great building, really only about 5 miles away in Somerdale. And it's a cool building. It was built in 1969. It was a Motown Records pressing plant for a decade.
Wow, that's really awesome.
Unfortunately, it didn't leave any of the albums behind. But
right.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of character to it.
Awesome. So what was the morale of your family and your friends when you told them that you were doing this?
My family, they were supportive. It wasn't like, oh my God, you're throwing your career away. They were supportive, and then friends are like, hey, just like, if a buddy of yours said, hey, I'm opening up a brewery or a distillery, you'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, but it was such a new thing. When we opened up, there were maybe 500 breweries, 600 breweries in the country, and none in the southern half of New Jersey. So it was a different time. People used to come to our brewery and say, hey, where's the next closest New Jersey brewery? And I'd be like, well, you can go to Atlantic City, which is 50 miles, or you can go to Princeton, which is, 50 miles.
Right.
And now from our brewery, you could probably, in a 10-mile radius, there's probably 10 breweries.
Yeah, they're popping up everywhere. It's just...
Yeah, we went from like 500 when we opened. It's probably 8,000 now.
Yeah.
So.
It's, everybody wants to be a brewery owner.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right. So what's something...
It's a lot of work.
So what's something when... Right, you said it's a lot of work. What's something you never thought you were going to have to deal with when first initially opening?
It's, I was kind of open. I'm very hands-on. People say, well, what do you do? And I said, I pretty much do what nobody else on the team wants to do. So, I cleaned the bathrooms for 17 years.
Right.
But it was just the depth of this industry, because you're manufacturing, you're highly regulated, you're dealing with a perishable food product, and it's all about marketing and sales. So you've got to wear we started with 4 people.
Right.
So I was wearing a lot of hats, and I was doing the bookkeeping, which, my 1 year in college, I said, I'm going to be an accounting major. And after a semester, I'm like, man, this is like the most boring thing ever. And then I wound up doing the books for like 15 or 16 years.
Yeah, right. It all came back around to you.
But, it's just kind of being open and, jumping into all that, because it's not like you ever shut the door at the end of the day and say, wow, that's great. My desk is cleaned off and I got everything done. So it's just, and I like that. I got into it to be a brewer.
Right.
And brewing is interesting, but, at a big scale, you're kind of, it's not like you get up every morning and say, okay, what hop can I experiment with, or what can I do? It's kind of, you've got your flagships and your main brands, and you're just, making those beers and making them as good as you can and making them as consistent as you can. It's not like every day inventing a new style.
Right. So consistency is the name of the game, pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once there's a lot of these small breweries now. There's some really good ones, but, you go to them and it's kind of charming that every time you go, they're all different beers. And, sometimes they always taste the same, sometimes they don't, but it's not a big deal. Right. But you go to a store and you buy a 4-pack or a 6-pack from anywhere from 10 to 18 bucks. You better be pretty darn close to what you remember last time, or you're not going to be happy.
Yeah, for sure. So what were your responsibilities at Flying Fish when you first started? And how have they changed over the years to what your role is now with the company?
Well, when I first started, we had a sales guy and we had a brewer and assistant brewer. So they were in the back. I was in the office. Andy was on the road trying to make sales. So I did everything from, answering the phone and door knocks to the books to helping out on the bottling line. I mean, I did it all.
Right.
And, over the years, as we added staff, we have 34 employees now. I also did tours and worked the tasting room, did festivals. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of beer festivals I did, but that's what everybody did at the time.
Right.
We started in '96. It was the same year as Victory and Dogfish Head and Yards, and it was kind of a networking thing. Everybody just did what they needed to do. As you get bigger, you have more of a staff in the back, more of a structure. These days, this year, I just started to step back a little bit. We hired a president 2 years ago to kind of take over a lot of my role, just because, after 24 years, it's kind of the tools in my toolbox are starting to run out. And, it was good to get a fresh set of eyes on the branding and the product lineup and all of that, and it's great. So I work with him closely. I do a lot of other things, but day to day, I'm not as hands-on as I used to be. I'm completely happy with that. Now someone comes in with an HR problem, I'm like, talk to Lou.
Right. Pass it on down the road. So you talk about, you said you have about 34, what was it? 34 employees?
Yeah,
34.
I mean, it's kind of a little in flux right now with this whole COVID craziness.
Right.
But yeah.
So that was kind of my question. Did you have to let anybody go during all that, and like what adjustments that you are aware of that you had to make to keep afloat and keep business moving?
Yeah, that's I thought this was going to be a great year. We had a whole new lineup of stuff coming out.
Right.
Unfortunately, the virus hit at the absolute worst time. We had all our summer beers produced. We had all our new product lines ready to launch. Our biggest single customer is the Phillies ballpark, and we do special beers for them in 16-ounce cans. That was all gone. All these kegs are made, and overnight everything shut down. So we lost about 40% of our customers, including, the Phillies, which that's not coming back this year.
Yeah, right.
So we had to lay off about 40%, mostly in sales, but we did lay off some production. And we were able to qualify for one of the PPP loans. So we were able to bring some salespeople back a couple of months ago.
Right.
We just brought a few more back. So we're getting back up to normal staffing. What happened, though, when there was the shutdown, retailers didn't want to bring in any new products. They weren't seeing salespeople, and they were like, we're just backfilling what we have on our shelves. So that's it. We don't want to see anything new. We don't even talk about anything new. And we had several new beers and 15 packs that were just sitting in the brewery because we couldn't ship them anywhere. And and then all that other beer. But, a lot of people are in the same situation. So fortunately, we were able to retail out of the tasting room just to go beer, not obviously on premise. But, that's really helped. And our fans and our consumers and the local communities really rallied and, supported us that way by coming by and, buying a case or two from us. Right.
So who do you think inspired you the most in the brewing industry?
There were a lot of people. I mean, at Siebel, I met, I got into it. I mean, I was a home brewer, and it's like craft beer is the ultimate, and everything else is just, watery yellow, junk. And, at Siebel, they were known they were open since the Civil War, and there were brewers when I went to school there from all over the world, big companies, small companies, and you kind of realize like, hey, all beer is good. Number one, and number two is, we're all dealing with the same issues,
Right.
different scale. So that was really good. Just to kind of open your mind that way and not kind of say, oh, it's a big company, so, their beer's bad. It's just, you open your palate. So there are a lot of people I've met over the years. When I was putting together the brewery, I used my writing background, so I was working for the New Brewer magazine, which was the industry national publication at the time. And I was able to get a network. I would interview someone and say, hey, do you have a second? Can I take off my reporter hat and put on my startup hat?
Right.
And, pick people's brains. So there were, Alan Newman from Magic Hat was really helpful. There were a lot of people that, were more than willing to share, advice and resources and contacts and things like that.
It's great. So like when all these pressures kind of build up from like things like COVID, for instance, I'm sure it's not easy to deal with. How important is a mental break for you, and what does that look like?
Well, ever since I walk like 4 miles a day, and ever since this pandemic hit, I've like 6 or 7,
Right.
And just either put on music or a podcast, and just kind of get a step away from it. And we're fortunate. I mean, the beer industry is one of the best industries in the world. Even if it's a bad day, you're still doing something that so many people would die to be working in this industry. So it's you go to we had an electrician, and I said one day, I said, so what do you like most working about here? What do you think that's different? He goes, well, I go to a party and people say, what do you do? And I say, I'm an electrician. They're like, okay, then move on.
Right.
But if he says, hey, I'm an electrician at a brewery, people are like, tell me more.
Now wait a minute.
So it's just it's an industry that is meaningful to people. I mean, for me, some of the most meaningful stuff that happens at the brewery are when people say, hey, we served your beer at our wedding or at our kid's christening, or
Right.
we've had, now with the tasting room, we've had wedding receptions at the brewery. We did one a couple of years ago. I actually officiated. I got
Wow.
the minister's license online and did the service. It was a blast. And it's a product that is kind of imprinted or becomes part of a meaningful part of people's lives, and that's pretty powerful. That's
Right.
that's so rewarding.
So what do you think's been the biggest change in the last 5 years in the industry for you?
Well, I think that, just the explosion of breweries, and
Right.
I think it's a good thing. I think there's some really good newer breweries. I think for me, the biggest change personally is that it's kind of, it's not as, the camaraderie isn't what it used to be. I mean, before I would help anyone get started up and give advice and, for what it was worth.
Right.
I think there's a lot of folks now getting into it, and it's just kind of a cool thing, and you can get into it for not a lot of money, but there's not that, I don't know. Sometimes maybe people feel like entitled, like you should be helping them, or
Right.
there's just, or I'm going to charge $16.99 for this 4-pack, and even though it tastes like crap, I'm not going to dump it.
Right.
I just think that it's a different, and I can't say that's good or bad, but I think it's just a different mindset from some of the original, the generation that I came up in, which is probably like the second generation of craft brewing.
Right.
And even the generation after that, it was we invested $750,000 in 1996,
Wow.
which we did it cheap at the time.
Right.
Now for less than 10% of that, you can, be a brewery. So it's a different kind of dynamic. Like I said, there's a lot of great small folks opening up. I'm friendly with, a lot of them, but it's frankly kind of hard to keep track these days. I'm like, what brewery? Where?
Yeah. Right. Well, with that being said, I hear a lot about like there is a lot of camaraderie. But like you said, when there's one opening every day, how do you go about staying ahead of your competition?
That's and I think that's kind of one of the reasons that I kind of took a step back and we brought in a new leader who's a little younger. It's kind of just I'm a little bit more old school. I like a good crisp pilsner or a really nice hoppy West Coast IPA. But the world wants citrus, the world wants hazy, the world wants pastry stouts, and some of that I like, but I'm not sure I'm I would be making the best decisions based on my palate. So
Right.
it's nice to get the perspective of different people on the team and look at it a little differently. And again, we used to just have 4 year-round beers and 4 seasonals, and now we're putting out all kinds of different things because that's what the market wants. They what's new, what's different. We want cans, we want big cans, we want crowlers. So it was good to get just another set of eyes in there, get another perspective.
Right. Do you still have a big say in what kind of beers are made for the company?
I get a vote,
Okay.
but I don't want to have a big say. I mean, I'm not the target market anymore. We have to get younger with our target market.
Of course.
And,
right.
We've done that. So I enjoy the beers, but I'm not, I have a lot of experience, but I don't really feel that I have the best handle on what, to me, pastry stouts, if I never had another one, I'd be fine with that. Give me a nice
Right.
imperial stout. I'm good with that. But, so it's kind of, I really, that's why we have a great diverse team, and, we really rely on each other for that.
Right. So what was the beer that was like your gateway beer into craft brewing?
Wow. Okay. Way back when
Right.
there was a contract beer, Manhattan Brewing.
Yes, my father tells me about this beer all the time.
New Amsterdam.
Right.
So that was like one of the early craft beers. I'd always been interested, even growing up. Philly has such a great brewing history, so I was never like a Budweiser, Miller, Coors guy. It was always,
Right.
Schmitz or Ortlieb's or Schaefer up in the Lehigh Valley. I was always kind of attuned to local beers. And then, it became Sierra Nevada, go out west and, New Belgium.
Right.
Some of their Abbey beers, the Abbey styles, like the double was always phenomenal. Deschutes, our first brewer came from Deschutes, and, they still make their porter is still one of my favorite beers. So yeah, some of the early folks like that, Brooklyn, even some of the early Brooklyn stuff, or the black chocolate stout is a great beer.
Very good.
So it was, you had to really root for them. I remember one time I was traveling, I was in Utah, and I was at like a mini mart, and at the bottom shelf, all the way in the back, was this dusty 6-pack of Wasatch Pale Ale or IPA, and I was like, oh man, this is so awesome. At the time I didn't have the palate. It was probably so oxidized.
Right.
But I didn't know. It just tasted different.
Right.
And even early on, Yingling Lord Chesterfield Ale, I'm like, what's this flavor? This is great. It turns out it's Cascade hops.
Right.
Because nobody else was doing that. So
awesome. So what advice would you have for somebody that wants to open their own brewery?
I think it's a lifestyle, but it's hard work. I mean, it's a fun industry, but you really need to, I still see folks opening up in the middle of this whole pandemic, and who the heck knows how this is going to play out. You've got the dream and you want to pursue the dream, but I really think you have to sometimes take a step back and, look at the cold, hard reality. And I know that's hard to do because I was in that position, but I think it's just, understanding that it's not ever a 40-hour week, and at the small scale you're never gonna not even not get rich, but maybe not even pay yourself. So it's I think and just being open to saying, okay, there's all these regulations, there's OSHA, there's the FDA, things like that, and just accepting that, hey, I'm going to handle all this. I'll deal with it. A lot of folks don't think of that. They think it's just about the brewing is the easiest part and the fun part, and unfortunately, that's kind of the least of it. Because even if you make an awesome beer in this market, you got to get out there and get the word out, or have great social media presence.
Right.
It used to be that brew it and they will come, but that hasn't been that way since the 90s.
So, did you have a funny story for us? On late notice?
Yeah, I guess it's humorous. So, back in the day when we don't do tours anymore because of this. Back in the day, way back when, like in February, when you could take groups of people into the brewery and talk to them up, closer than 6 feet.
Yeah, right.
So we would always do brewery tours over the years, and it would always fascinate me. They weren't like drawn out, but they were very concise but very thorough. The whole brewing process, let people sniff and touch the ingredients, and really give them that overview. And invariably, almost every time at the end, someone would raise their hand and say, "Okay, so where do you add the alcohol?" And I'm like, didn't you listen to me for the last 20 minutes? And I was telling a buddy of mine, he's like, "Oh, that's kind of like my dog Rocky. It's like he always knows that if I'm eating a donut or a snack or something, I always give him the last piece." And he just stares at me, and he gets a blank look in his eye. And it's just, I could say anything. There could be a steak behind him. There could be cats walking around behind him, and he's just focused on that. He's like, that's what it must be. It's, they're thinking about, because we would give people a sampler after the tour,
right.
And this person's probably just focused on, oh my God, the beer.
Yeah, right.
Not even, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher, just wow, 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 wow. And so that was really funny. So then after that, I was like, okay, which one? I'd start a tour and be like, okay, which one's the Rocky, or which one's so. But it's fun. It's great. The last 5 or 6 years, there's so many breweries that people don't really need to get a tour anymore. Before, it was like people had been to Busch Gardens or something like that, and that was their only experience.
Right.
But it's the nice thing about our industry is you can be one-on-one. People can say, "Oh, I met the head brewer, I met the owner, I met the founder," and it really, it's a small community-based business.
Right. So I have this little thing called Quick Fire 5. It's just 5 quick questions, beer-based questions.
Okay.
All right. And it's usually like 1 to 2 word answers, depending.
Sounds good.
All right.
There you go. 2 words.
There you go. All right. Ready? Here we go. One of your beers you'd recommend someone try?
Jersey Juice.
Gotcha. Favorite brewery other than your own?
Wow.
I know. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Deschutes.
All right. Favorite style of beer? IPA. All right. Last beer you drank that really blew you away?
Okay, that's interesting. It was a Bitburger triple hop lager, which I guess was a collab with Sierra, which I didn't know about, but it was an awesome beer. Yeah. Very crisp, but nice hop character to it.
I'm definitely going to look for that if I can get my hands on it. And you have 1 keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. What beer are you choosing?
That would be, well, for 2 weeks, I would go with our Abbey Double, because that's 7.2%. It's a nice drinkable beer, not too filling, but, you get that extra value, 50% extra alcohol. So, yeah, the Abbey Double. Gotcha.
Well, Gene, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. So, great talking with you.
Yeah, pleasure. Guys, I'm Mike Hurton for the Brew World Order podcast with Gene Muller of Flying Fish. Thanks again, man.
Yep, have a good one.
Hey guys, so that was my interview with Gene Muller of Flying Fish Brewing Company in Somerdale, New Jersey. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you're ever in Somerdale, you should definitely stop by the brewery, check it out, give it a tour, or take a look for their beers in any local stores in New Jersey. Every other Sunday I'll be posting a new episode, so stay tuned. Like I said, subscribe. You'll never miss another episode. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast. Thanks for listening. You stay safe out there.